The motor of the military's most cutting-edge tank malfunctioned amid a real-time showcase. 3 specialists attempted repairs. Not one succeeded. Then an overlooked individual was referenced. On that occasion, encircled by secured fasteners, he not only mended a motor, he reclaimed his heritage. Let's explore this tale. Ex-Army Sergeant Elias Thorne, referred to plainly as Eli, is a repairman by both vocation and intuition. He never attended university. Bereaved early in life, he matured in adoptive residences, devoting much of his hours disassembling whatever he could grasp merely to reassemble it. He was the sort of youngster who preferred hearing the hum of a defective cog over participating in any corridor dialogue. By the age of 12, he had single-handedly mended the foster home's corroded laundry facility hydraulics. At 17, he joined the armed forces, aspiring for an improved existence distant from the hardships he had experienced. Throughout his tenure, Eli was never the chatty kind, yet he was invariably the initial person summoned when a conveyance stalled in remote areas or a power unit ceased in the pitch black. He established a subdued standing on the installation as the fellow who avoided commotion but accomplished tasks. Whereas others adhered to guides sequentially, Eli appeared to perceive the heartbeat of the motor to detect the cadence of its breakdowns. It was as if he possessed an innate talent for comprehending mechanisms. Those acquainted with him, and they are few, view him as peculiar. At 68, he bears the burden of 2 distinctly contrasting existences upon his shoulders. The initial one, a harsh youth that molded the individual he evolved into. The subsequent, a service occupation that essentially concluded in 1982 when a blast amid a trial motor examination embedded metallic shards in his right limb and unseen marks on his prospects. His armed forces retirement scarcely sufficed for his continuing healthcare expenses. The operations on his limb had exhausted his reserves long ago, compelling him to dispose of the dwelling he acquired for the spouse who subsequently departed him without offspring 2 years following the mishap. To sustain himself, Eli labors repairing farm plows and substantial equipment at building locations near Tucson, Arizona. He consistently shows up ahead of time, his aged utility vehicle groaning along the unpaved paths, a weathered equipment container occupying the passenger seat and a dark brew in a vacuum flask beside him. Residents recognize him visually, the elderly gentleman with the unwavering stare and a hobble in his right limb. He speaks little, merely inquires what is malfunctioning and commences labor. Occasionally, he passes whole days uttering no more than 3 phrases, but when he vocalizes, individuals heed. His statements are direct. No idle chatter. Junior employees frequently deem him strange, even disturbing. But the senior people comprehend. Eli's not present to mingle. He's present because an item is defective. And when an item malfunctions, it somehow invariably summons him. He resides solitarily in a compact, repurposed outbuilding behind a defunct maintenance facility. It's a humble area, but Eli refrains from grumbling. He knows no alternative manner of existence. Mending items is how he persists. Every unusual noise, every irregular oscillation, every malfunction. It's a dialect to him, and in that dialect, Elias Thorne still senses utility, still discovers purpose. His antiquated telephone seldom rings, but on that day it did. On that Monday dawn, Eli was completing fixes on a John Deere 5E Series plow's fluid mechanism when the summons arrived. "Mr. Thorne, this is General Harlan from Fort Wuka. We require your assistance. It's critical." Eli almost chuckled. It had been generations since anyone addressed him as Mr. with that sort of deference in their tone. "I believe you've contacted the incorrect person, General." "No, you're Elias Thorne, previous sergeant in the Army Corps of Engineers." Quietude lingered in the atmosphere. Eli cleaned his palms on his tattered denim and glanced back at the plow. He contemplated disconnecting, but there was an element in the general's tone, something he hadn't encountered in years. That inflection you solely detect in periods of emergency. An hour afterward, Eli was traveling along the path toward Fort Wuka. The arid grit adhered to his windscreen, forming a muted barrier between him and the Armed Forces compound, emerging on the skyline. It had been 26 years since he'd entered a military installation, his pulse irregular, trapped someplace between inquisitiveness and a profound, poignant reminiscence. He stationed near the entry portal, inhaled deeply, seized his aged instrument container from the rear seat, and proceeded toward the Sentinel station. The trooper at the portal couldn't have exceeded 22. His gaze surveyed Eli from crown to sole, dwelling on the deteriorated footwear, discolored denim, and perforation-filled garment. The instrument container appeared as if it had endured a conflict. Name, Elias Thorne. I was summoned by General Harlan. The youthful trooper examined a notepad, scowling. There's no Elias Thorne permitted for today. Eli remained composed, his limbs relaxed at his flanks. He'd absorbed long ago that clarifications merely exacerbated scenarios like this. Would you verify with the general while I linger? The trooper wavered, then lifted the receiver. The exchange was concise, marked by, "Yes, sir," and "Comprehended, sir." When he terminated, his demeanor had altered marginally. "The general's in a conference. Sergeant Reyes will accompany you." Sergeant Reyes appeared 2 minutes subsequently. "Mr. Thorne, I'm Sergeant Reyes. The general requested me to guide you to Hangar 7. They traversed quietly across the grounds and through the installation hallways. Eli observed the inquisitive glances from junior troops, the muted discussions that halted as they proceeded. Reyes maintained a somewhat quicker tempo, obliging Eli to accelerate despite the restriction in his right limb. "Do you labor for a defense supplier, sir?" Eli paused. "I perform upkeep tasks," Reyes affirmed, but the grin didn't extend to his gaze. Eli knew precisely what the sergeant was pondering. Hangar 7 was enormous, with a lofty metal roof that magnified every noise. In the middle, partly shrouded with coverings, rested a military conveyance Eli identified instantly. One of the novel mixed-generation armored vehicles. He'd only viewed specifications on it years prior. 3 individuals in pale laboratory garments were bent over the revealed motor, their tones resounding exasperation. As Reyes and Eli neared, one of them, a hairless individual in his 40s, glanced upward. "Sergeant, is this the expert?" The inflection wasn't precisely impolite, but it conveyed evident doubt. Eli could sense the heaviness of assessment in their stares. "Sir, this is Elias Thorne." The hairless individual cleaned his palms on a fabric and proffered one. "Dr. Elias Grant, primary engineer on the initiative. Truthfully, we're somewhat astonished. We were anticipating someone a bit more youthful," appended the slender engineer with spectacles with more current qualifications. Eli clasped Grant's palm, gaze already on the mixed motor before him. It was a technological masterpiece. Some components he acknowledged, others that seemed to have advanced beyond anything in his background. "What appears to be the issue? This is a concealed mixed motor crafted to reduce combat zone warmth and sound traces. But the model has a vital malfunction. It forfeits energy after approximately 15 minutes of function. We've inspected all circuitry, detectors, fuel delivery, cooling mechanisms. Nothing succeeded. Then someone referenced your name. The initiative is stalled and duration is not favorable." Eli advanced nearer to the motor, his palms instinctively shifting to crucial examination spots. He could detect the engineer's restless glares behind him. "May I examine?" Grant gestured indistinctly. "Certainly, but we've had 5 experts here this week. We expended days conducting analyses. It's not a basic matter." Eli accessed his instrument container and extracted a compact illuminator and a manual auscultator, an antiquated apparatus junior technicians might consider obsolete. He commenced scrutinizing the motor systematically, disregarding the murmured remarks behind him. "He's actually employing that," the individual with spectacles whispered to Grant. "Perhaps we should clarify this isn't a lorry from the 60s. It's a sophisticated mixed mechanism," Grant stated, his tone elevating mildly. Eli persisted with his scrutiny for 20 minutes, assessing linkages, attending to faint noises no one else appeared to perceive. Ultimately, he halted at a particular segment of the motor and remained motionless for an extended instant. "Did you discover something?" Grant inquired, evidently restless. Eli secured his instrument container and pivoted to the engineers. "The issue isn't in the motor. What do you imply?" "It's in the mechanism amalgamation. There's a tiny oscillation in the attachment foundation that solely manifests once the motor warms and enlarges. That heat-triggered tiny oscillation generates discordant disharmony, disrupting the synchronization between the ignition motor and the electrical propulsion." The 3 engineers traded looks. Mr. Thorne, Grant articulated gradually. With all due respect, that's not feasible. We've evaluated all the attachment foundations. Did you evaluate them at ambient temperature? The quietude that ensued was response sufficient. Did you inspect the oscillation absorbers after 15 minutes at maximum warmth? The individual with spectacles glanced at a notepad. The absorbers are within manufacturer standards. Manufacturer standards were created for traditional motors. This mixed mechanism produces a distinct oscillation configuration. The malfunction solely occurs after the mechanism warms. It's readily overlooked by stationary or chilled analyses. Grant crossed his limbs. Mr. Thorne, with all due respect, that resembles conjecture. We require tangible information. Eli affirmed, retrieved his instrument container, and began proceeding toward the egress. Where are you heading? Reyes inquired. You don't require me. You already possess more knowledge than I do. Eli departed the hangar without hastening, his outline inclining mildly to the right from the ancient wound. Behind him, the three engineers remained in quietude, observing him depart. Out in the vehicle area, Eli initiated his vehicle and remained there for a few minutes with his palms on the steering. He didn't experience ire, merely a recognizable form of weariness, the individual everyone undervalued until they necessitated him. And even then, they favored not to accept. Hours subsequently, Eli's telephone rang while he was cleansing utensils after supper. It was Grant, but his inflection had entirely transformed. Mr. Thorne, this is Dr. Elias Grant. I owe you an apology. You were correct. We evaluated the attachment foundation after extended warmth exposure and discovered the tiny oscillation in the absorbers precisely as you depicted. Eli dried his palms gradually. I need you to return, sir. General Harlan would like to converse with you personally. The following day, Eli returned to Hangar 7, but this time the ambiance was altered. Grant was awaiting with an individual in armed forces attire whom Eli identified by his emblem as a general. Mr. Thorne, General Harlan stated, proffering his palm. I owe you an apology for the manner you were greeted yesterday. There's no necessity, General. Yes, there is, sir. Dr. Grant clarified what transpired. He also informed me you pinpointed a malfunction that our group of experts couldn't detect in a whole week. Mr. Thorne, the motor you scrutinized is constructed on concepts you assisted in formulating over 40 years ago. The attachment absorbers you identified as defective were initially conceived utilizing your own details. The hangar became silent. Grant and the other engineers attended with a blend of inquisitiveness and increasing unease. Sergeant Thorne Harlan persisted, employing Eli's armed forces designation for the initial occasion. May I inquire why one of the designers of the Armed Forces Mixed Propulsion Initiative, who just preserved a multi-million-dollar endeavor, is laboring outside our armed forces framework? Eli could sense their stares on him. It was the inquiry he'd been awaiting to hear for 26 years, one he never knew how to respond without seeming like self-compassion. There was an incident during evaluation, sir, back in '82. I was held accountable for it, and I concluded with a lasting wound to my limb. After that, they perceived me as a risk. I comprehend, Harlan stated softly. Grant advanced, evidently uncomfortable. Mr. Thorne, I genuinely apologize. Eli provided a minor affirmation. Doctor, don't concern. It's fine. Harlan approached nearer to Eli. Sergeant, may I present a suggestion? We have additional initiatives confronting grave matters. Would you be inclined to, General? Eli softly interjected. I value the proposal. I truly do. But that segment is past me now. That's not who I am any longer. With all due respect, Sergeant, you possess a talent you always have, but I honor your choice. Then permit me to present one additional suggestion, Sergeant. The General extracted an envelope from his compartment. This is to compensate the assistance you rendered and the acknowledgement you should have obtained years ago. Eli didn't accept it immediately. He merely gazed at the creased document, then at the General's palm. I didn't perform it for that, sir. I know, Harlan responded. That's precisely why you merit more than what's in this envelope. Eli ultimately accepted it and inserted it into the compartment of his outerwear without unfolding it. He gazed one final time at the armored vehicle at the distant end of the hangar. The synthetic illuminations mirrored off its lateral sections. There was no additional clamor, no additional trembling, no additional malfunction. The subsequent morning, Eli was concluding the fluid cylinder modification on the John Deere 5E series plow when he heard wheels grinding on the unpaved path. A dark sport utility vehicle halted near the storage building. Dr. Elias Grant emerged. He rested against the sport utility vehicle's guard, the dawn sunlight projecting a keen glow across his countenance. "Sergeant, I had to arrive here and convey something to you personally, if I may." "Of course, Doctor." "You know, Sergeant, when you pinpointed that tiny oscillation, I felt diminutive. Diminutive because I've always perceived myself as highly intelligent, perhaps even superior to others. But evidently, I was mistaken. I've expended years encircled by specialists, doctorates, engineers, youthful intellects with gleaming certificates on the partition. But none of them possessed the acuity you exhibited in that hangar. You detected something no one else could detect." Eli gazed out toward the skyline where the arid land encountered the firmament. He retrieved a cloth and gradually cleaned his palms without haste. Learning has everything to do with attending, with modesty. Mechanisms always provide an alert when something's misplaced, but not everyone has the endurance to comprehend them or the modesty to attend to someone who does. Grant lowered his cranium, contemplative. He inhaled deeply, then extended and clasped Eli's palm. One concluding act of appreciation for what he had just absorbed about existence. As Dr. Elias Grant gradually vanished down the unpaved path in his sport utility vehicle, Eli Thorne remained observing. There he lingered between two realms, bearing within himself the subdued evidence that a person's genuine value is never forfeited. It merely awaits the appropriate instant to be rediscovered by those astute enough to gaze beyond exteriors with modesty. If you enjoyed this story, click the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next.